So, Boker Tov, good morning, everybody. It's so good to see you all again. Uh, Last week, we began with an introduction to the book of Tehillim, of Psalms. We talked about the difference between Tehilot being praises and Tehillim being the name of the book. And we specifically zoomed into Psalm 30. If you remember some of the things about Ba'erev Yalin Bechi, in the evening we will cry. Baboker Rina, but in the morning we will be singing praises. We'll be happy, and we talked about so many things of how Psalm 30 brings you to connect with our emotions, including the fact that the beginning of it, Mizmor Shir Chanukat Habayit LeDavid, the dedication of the temple, was actually written by King David, even though he was not allowed to build the temple. In other words, there are aspirations that we have, even though we know that we may not be able to accomplish them. It's always important to set a path in front of ourselves to aspire as high as we can. And then we finish with singing these words, Elecha Adonai Ekra, God, I will call you, I will reach to you, Ve'el Adonai Et Hanan, I will plead with God, probably in moments of uncertainty. But also creating a relationship, which is what we do when we do tefillah. Sometimes we wonder, many times we wonder, to what extent we say to ourselves, but I can't pray. And I propose that prayer in the narrower but also in the more extensive sense of the word is about us being able to create a communication with the creator of the universe. He, she, as you want, to assert it, a force, the Shekhinah, a source of love, whatever you want to connect with, but the sense that there is that relationship, and that takes time, and it takes the considerable amount of energy and trying. We don't always succeed, we don't always get there. And we are now getting to the Psalm 23, that I am told, you can tell me if this is wrong, that many of you actually had to recite it in school. Is that true? Lynn, tell me about it.
I went to elementary school in Washington, D.C., and I know that for at least kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, we did. We had to recite this 23rd Psalm, the Lord's Prayer, and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Aha. George, you wanted to say something too.
Uh, I don't remember reciting it, but I remember in second grade, our teacher would read it to us every morning. And, it's such a peaceful way to start the day. I mean, I really felt settled down after that. I think the other kids did too.
I see. So listen, so clearly many of you already know the translation of this. Since we have Leora here, we're going to also devote today two things. We're going to begin with a rendition of Yossi Banai, an actor and a musician in Israel. He's going to recite it in Hebrew because I wanted to get a sense of how the words, because part of the beauty of this, like especially with poetry, is sonic, is the way that words sound to you. So since we have the pleasure that pretty much the translation of it, even though I'm going to attempt to have that for you as well, I wanted to hear Yossi Vanai reading it, and then we're going to do something else. So let me do that right now. I'm going to do this, and that's okay. Let me see if my capabilities allow for all this. Share the screen. This is the Psalm. This is Yossi Banai right there. Haha. I hope you all can see this. Here is Yossi Banai. Okay, wrong thing. Okay. Very quickly. And give me 1 second. I'm so sorry. I apologize. I had it all ready, but of course, life intervenes. One more second.
Computer gremlins.
Okay, there it is. Now we have it. And I'm gonna do this all over again, and hopefully it's gonna be good. Thank you for your patience. And that's it. Okay, that is that, and this is this. Okay. Okay.
אדוני רואי, לא אחסר. בנאות דשא ירביצני, על מי מנוחות ינהלני. נפשי ישובר, ינחני במעגלי צדק, למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות, לא אירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך, המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי. דישנת בשמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
So excellent. I'm gonna stop the screen. What did you think? I hope you were able to see the translation, though you know it by heart probably. But what did you think by Yossi Banai chanting Psalm 23? How was that?
Well, I don't think that's the way that George's teacher would have read it. It doesn't, I think, have that feeling that George spoke about of that comforting way to start the morning. It was like shrouded in mystery, and to me, almost with the music, almost a sense of doom. I could hear the Kaddish being read to that.
Right.
So I found it a little bit troubling.
You found it a little bit troubling, and thank you, Cliff, for saying that, because I was going to introduce this element later. But if you notice, there is a contrasting tradition between the Ashkenazi tradition and the Sephardic tradition. How do I say this? In the Ashkenazi tradition, Psalm 23 is mostly recited when? During funerals. Exactly, probably what Yossi Banai actually was in a little bit alluding to, there is an element of uncertainty, there is an element of trouble, a little bit of perhaps of the Israeli experience of not really knowing what life is going to bring and how close God is to us. But notice exactly that in that case, this psalm in the Ashkenazi tradition is pretty much putting an accent on where? On a place that says, Gam ki elech bet gates al mavet. If I would walk, you can probably translate it better than me, in the shadow of death. Right? So because of those, lo irara, I will have no fear. Ki ata imadi, because you are with me. But notice that the idea, the accent is put where? In that element of, if I were be close to death. The question that I'm sure you're asking is, what is the Sephardic and actually most of the world looking at this psalm in recited every day actually, and recited as the beginning of the Kiddush for Shabbat, because it says Kosi Revaya, because my cup is overflowing. My cup is overflowing. I'm going to now take you to a different version of it, a version that's actually in German. It's Franz Schubert, and Franz Schubert is actually doing something. This is he wrote it specifically for women, and we'll talk a little bit later about what that means. So let me just put it in there for you. Here it goes. You probably would like to also have the German, so you can see what it is. I'm going to share the screen so we all see this. I'm going nuts with all this, but we'll try as well as I can. Let's see, this is that. Okay. Share the screen. There you go. And now Anyway, how different, isn't it? Very. Fran says, very different. How is different, Fran?
Amazingly warm, uplifting, comforting, encompassing.
Wow.
The difference is stark.
Right, right. A couple things before you add to it. One thing is, please remember that that Schubert is the composer of, among other things, the Schöne Müllerin and all the lieder that are about what we call bucolic. They're related to nature. They're related to the lake and to the pastoral aspect and the nature, because he's a romantic, of course, right? So all associated with nature. And notice, for instance, something we did not say, and is the element of the shepherd, of God being a shepherd, and how in Judaism the idea of a shepherd is associated mostly with prophets. If you remember, prophets are always the ones that gather, right, from Moshe and up, right? They gather the people, they bring them together, and they show compassion. Because if you remember in Yom Kippur, what is that God does? God counts everyone. Like each of us are we are so special. So there's this, and then you notice also the tone painting for Schubert, the idea that every time, whether you are by the cup that is overflowing, I was trying, I don't know if you could see, I was trying to show you some of the key words, right, that were related and how he was trying to paint them and show the interest that he has. And finally, this element of, and I will be in God's house, in Hebrew, le'orech yamim, for, sometimes translated, for eternity, for the extent of the days. It doesn't say my days, it says the days. So this is something. Now, I wanted to, I'll let you tell me more of your impressions about this. I know for me it sounded a little bit low in the volume, but I hope you could hear it all right. Okay, great. So any other thoughts about this Schubert rendition of Psalm 23? Don't tell me about the translation. We know it's a 19th century translation. I left it on purpose that way so you could see that there is a whole sense of a God that is grandiloquent, that many times we don't seem to ascribe so readily anymore. But anything else that captures your feelings? Liora, bakasha.
I thought it was a very parve kind of rendition. Fran was overjoyed.
What was the word?
Parve.
Say
like
meat nor milk.
Oh.
So the first one was very dark. And for me, this one was light and flighty and had nothing to do with the words. It was just like, a beautiful superimposed melody that did not really bring out the meaning of the wonderful song for me.
Oh, that's exactly right. That's why this provokes all kinds of things. Schubert was close to the end of his life, by the way, when he wrote this. So there is, I guess, a sense also in, perhaps, I don't know if I'm reading too much, the idea that he was wishing that he would go in a peaceful and comfortable way, right? That we don't have to subscribe to it, but I just wanted to show you the contrast. For the sake of time, let me take you to somewhere else. This somewhere else we had a meeting yesterday, and Leora was saying something very powerful about the feminine aspect of God. So we're going to see, listen to a version in English that Kolot Alev has sung, Bobby McFerrin, where God is a she. We could talk later about what we mean by it and what he meant by it. And full disclosure, I cut a little bit of the end of it. That's the Latin doxology. He includes this as part of the mass. And when we did it with Kolot Alev, I didn't think that I will survive my contract if we actually included that. So I did my self-censorship, and no one kind of knew, so it went on. Here is this version of Bobby McFerrin's. That's not what I wanted to show you. Maybe this is what I want to show you. And here is, I think, if I get it right. The Lord is my shepherd. I have all I need. She makes me lie down in green meadows. Beside the still waters she will lead. She restores my soul. She rights my wrongs. She leads me in a path of good things and fills my heart with songs. Even though I walk through a dark and dreary land, there is nothing that can shake me. She has said she won't forsake me. I'm in her hand. She sets a table before me in the presence of my foes. She anoints my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and I will live in her house forever, forever and ever. Okay, so on purpose, I hope I succeeded in showing you the translation that I had before. I wanted to do it so you also can see that Bobby McFerrin has his own interpretation of the psalm in terms of the words, including the words that he does not set to music, including those. That's on purpose. I left it so you could see that the road, that my stuff, he has nothing to tell us about that. And in other cases, he has more to say than the text is including. And the floor is yours. Any thoughts about this version? George, please.
Yes, I noticed that with the rod and the staff. One thing I've noticed in a lot of translations, and this is an example, And when you go in a more interpretive direction, sometimes some of the original poetry, the original metaphor kind of breaks down, because that really supports the idea of a shepherd, the rod and the staff.
Okay. So maybe Bobby McFerrin wasn't so interested in the shepherd vision. He was interested more of other things. Steve, tell us.
Yeah, I was interested in the fact, again, this is part of the translation. The original starts in the third person, referencing God, and then moves to the second person, and it's more intimate. You know, you comfort me, and you prepare the table for me, and so forth. And I think he stayed in the third person throughout. Not only that was it she, which of course attracted attention, but it was continually in the third person, which I think imparts maybe a little bit of distance. But of course, in English, the only way to communicate that it's female is by staying in the third person, unlike in Hebrew or a lot of other languages.
Correct, which is a real problem in translation, right? This is a question for the ladies. So what did you think when you finally heard that God was portrayed as a she? And what did you think about that? Did you think he was right? Did you think he was wrong? Did you think something in particular? Did you ascribe any meaning to it or not? I'll let you say what you wish. Karen.
Well, I know when in Kolot Halev, whenever we would sing this for people, we'd start out Psalm 23, and as soon as we got to that first she, there'd be murmuring in the whole audience, that little chuckling in the audience. That's too bad, that I always think that's sort of a shame. That what's wrong with God perhaps being she? It's binary. It's either he or she. I guess you could say that's neither, but so that was an interesting reaction, that the audience always reacts that way.
Lovely. I totally agree with you. Totally agree. It shows that we have to change those stereotypes. We have to work very hard to make them really disappear, right? And begin to think of God in a more multifaceted way than the he that we've been indoctrinated for so long. And like I many times err by emphasizing. Anyone else? Yes.
I was just going to say, a lot of prayer leaders, just put the word God in there instead of he or she. It's just God leads me beside still waters. God does this. God restores my soul. Instead of using a pronoun, just use the noun.
Yes,
God,
sometimes Karen, like Steve said, we use you, and we make it a little closer. It's somewhat problematic in terms of if you're really grammatically attuned, but nevertheless, it's I think it also an element of connection, right? When you say you as opposed to she or he, they're farther away, but you are closer. It's very interesting because I was expecting that perhaps you were going to tap on the fact that in Judaism, many times, God is portrayed as she, because we talk about the Shekhinah. We talked about this quality of God, right, that brings us together. Shochen is a neighbor today in Hebrew, but Shochen is to lie, to connect, right? We have the famous pasuk verse in the Torah that speaks about ve'asuli mikdash, and you would build a tabernacle, ve'shachanti ve'tocham, and I will gather that in you. It says the verse, and then we always discuss it all the time with really interesting ideas. So
I could say something.
Please.
Okay, thank you. Right, I was also going to just add about the that God is sort of all encompassing. and that it is a little bit of a language problem when we can't address the female and the male side of God, I guess, at the same time. And also, I think, remember, Ramon, that you mentioned when Bobby McFerrin wrote this, he was also thinking about his mother. And that may be another reason why he chose to use the word she.
That was actually, thank you, Rowan, that was actually the reason why he wrote it as a she. He was thinking about his mother. That's what he writes in the columns in the score, the music score. He says, dedicated to my mother. So you wouldn't know that, of course, when you just listen to it. And that's the beauty of it, that we can think of it in any way we want. I wanted to go back to the text for a second because I wanted to pause on a couple things that many times we miss. For instance, I am sure that Lynn, tell us what is that version that of the Lord's Prayer that says, God is my shepherd, and then what it says, I shall not want, right? I shall not want. But that's not what the original Hebrew says. The words lo ichsar, from the word chaser to something that it's missing, right? So it says lo ichsar, meaning I lack nothing. Not that I don't want. I'm going to stop. Not that I'm not wanting something, but the bombardment of commercial phone, that's, for instance, one of the things that I lack nothing of. I get all these phone calls every day, always, right? So the Hebrew lo ichsar doesn't mean I shall not want. Judaism is not intending to be kind of like in a cave, but like wanting nothing, but it's saying, but I lack nothing, right? But I lack nothing. Lisa, please.
Well, there's really an older meaning of the word want is lack. I mean, like in 19th century. So I think it really did mean that at the time.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for teaching me that. I didn't know it. It's kind of like Shakespearean English or something. Mm-hmm. Okay. And Steve, you wanted also to
Yeah, just on the same topic. I mean, one thing that's so interesting about the 23rd Psalm is that we all know, all of us who grew up here, I think, know the King James Version, which is, I'm sure, what the teacher read to the class. I don't remember. I remember the Lord's Prayer in class every day. I don't remember the 23rd Psalm, but that's what they read, and that's what it's a classic of English literature. But it was written in the early 17th century, so that was a time when want could have had a different meaning than it has today. And there's other examples in it, but we're filtering this through the fact that this has come down to us, many of us, as a 17th century English text.
I see. Any other thoughts about that? Okay, and let me just point out to another element that I thought it would be interesting for us. These words in Hebrew, al mei menuchot yenahaleni. Al mei menuchot, you have the transliteration right there. Yenahaleni. And translated normally as leads me beside still waters. But I want to use the word menuchot, and I want to use it perhaps in a different vein. The word menuchot is the plural of menucha, right? Of menucha. And menucha is what? Is rest, yes? We called Shabbat Menucha, right? Why do we call it Shabbat Menucha? Not necessarily because we do nothing on Shabbat. This is a concept that many times we get a little bit. People says, oh, it's Shabbat, so I just lie down and I wait until the day goes. Of course, none of you does that. But I propose that the idea of Shabbat Menucha is of acquiring that level of comfort, of that level of if you want, a meditative level, when you and I lack nothing, right? Or in the older version, want nothing, right? By the way, in Shabbat, we do both. We lack nothing and we want nothing. So that's why we don't have prayers, with one exception that I'm sure you're going to pick up on, that we ask. If you remember the Amidah, for instance, instead of having 19 blessings, has only 7. Why? Because you extricate from it all the blessings that are about asking for sustenance, asking, right? Because the idea is that on Shabbat we like nothing. Those are the mayim, right? The waters that the King David or the psalmist, if you wish, is actually proposing. That this is the connection that we have. And those Mei Menuchot are actually an element for Shabbat, which is another of the reasons why Sephardic Jews recited Dafka on Shabbat, because it has that connection in there. And I wanted to think about that in that way. And of course, the idea of restoring my soul, also an element for Shabbat, because you remember that on Shabbat we receive an extra soul, where we call a neshama yetera, and we actually, it's like regroup to make sure that that we are whole again, and the idea of wholeness, right, very much related to the word shalom. Of course, you all know that meaning of shalom being peace, and I want to suggest that the idea of that verb or of word rather of shalom is associated with the word of shleimut, of the idea of wholeness, Actually, that peace is a state that not necessarily we can stay all the time. That's why on every evening, right? When we say the words Ashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom ve'amidenu, right? So let me lie down in peace, right? And let me come back to return to life. Lechaim tovim u'shalom, with a life with a purpose, and with this sense of shleimut, of this sense of being whole, so we can then approach life with a different tone. So all this, in my opinion, I hope you agree, are very much elements that are connected to Shabbat, and I wanted, before we conclude, to talk about something that I'm sure those of you that are doctors, or that know more about the way that we connect with depression, right? Gam ki elech begei tzal mavet. The idea, even though I walk as the tzal from tzelem, right? But tzel is very interesting, because the word tzel is a shadow and mavet is death. So tzal mavet is a composite of both of them. Tzal mavet in the valley, right? Begei tzal mavet, and we translate the valley of the shadow of the death. And then immediately, lo ira ra, I will fear no evil. ki ata imadi, because you are with me. And I want to propose that those are the same, this is the same concept. When do you remember saying those very close words? And a very, 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 very prominent piyut, religious poem that paradoxically we recite every day when we wake up. Karen.
Oh, I was going to say Adon Olam.
Yes.
Say,
yes.
Yeah. V'yado afkid ruchi.
V'yado afkid ruchi. Karen is studying Adon Olam because it's part of the sixth movement of Askara that we will go with shameless publicity about the festival, the choral festival this Sunday that I'm sure no one will miss, right? Okay, so it says in Adon Olam, Shlomo Ibn Gaviro, Malaga in 12th century already tells us these words: Veyado afkid ruchi, in her hand, we will put my ruach, my spirit, right? Ve'im ruchi geviati, and if my soul, if my spirit faints, Adonai li, God is with me, velo ira, and I will have no fear. It's hard to say those words, and in fact, I want to conclude by saying that this is part of the connection in Judaism where you bring this and that, yet, and so King David or the psalmist is dialoguing with 12th century Spain. Imagine the beauty of that. And I wanna offer you as a blessing. May it be that when you are in times of trouble, in difficulties, that you could feel the proximity of that God that is yours, and feel the proximity of a force that reminds you that you're not alone, that you're never alone. And I also want to remind you that as I look at all of you, and I know that you do this every day, is that God is also in the community, in our community. So it's so important that when you are in need, you are able to ask. And all of us are able to say Hineni and here we are, to show you that we are that connection, that extension of God. So each of us can say, I have no fear because you are with me. So with that, I'm going to conclude this second series. We hope to see you next week at 10 o'clock. We'll try it until the end of the month, and hopefully if you like it, we'll continue on. I'll do a little brief survey, not to bother you. You receive them all the time, but simply at some point to know if this is an okay time, or sometimes I have speculated, if you remember for the Selichot, I have done it at 8 o'clock at night, and I don't know if that feels to you that it's better. And you can feel free to send me an email on your thoughts. You can send me, call me if you prefer. And yes, and thank you very much for giving me the honor of studying together with you. Okay? Let's have a fantastic day. Thank you,
Ramon.
Oh,
Thank you,
Lori,
Ramon.
did you want to say something, please? Oh, you have your hand out, maybe.
No, it's the emoji for
Oh,
expressing gratitude.
I need to learn the codes. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, bye-bye.